Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. I welcome you to English grade 6 video lessons. I'm your instructor Zia Hamid. I hope that you're doing well. Now my dear learners, we are going to deal with our unit number 2 of grade 6. The title is Someone Who Understands. We will be dealing with lecture 6A with the competency of oral communication. Now let's see what is our students learning outcome for this lesson. So for oral communication, our students learning outcome is ask and respond to question with correct language making, meaning explicit. So this SLO is about asking and answering questions, which is completing and fulfilling our competency of oral communication. We are going to adapt an ability of asking and responding to questions with correct language and making meaning explicit. So we will be talking about explicit meaning as well. Now this is our students learning outcome. This is our SLO's vertical linkage with the previous grade that you have already studied. Now let's begin our brainstorming session, where we have a question for you, that what do you think when you have to answer about anything? When you are proposed a question, when you are posed questions, how do you answer them? How do you prepare to answer it? Whether you are reading a passage and then answering the questions, or whether you are in an oral communication in where questions and answers are happening. So how do you answer something when you asked for it? Now let's move on. Let's talk about asking and answering questions. Now, asking and answering questions is a fundamental aspect of effective communication. My dear learners, we know that communication is a two-way process, back and forth. So when you are asking and answering questions, you are actually prolonging the conversation, and you are making it more effective, so that nothing is left unsaid and nothing is left that is not understandable. So this is why questioning and answering is very important if you want to have an effective communication with anyone. Moving on, let's see how many types of questions do we have and what kind of answers do we give to such questions. So questions are so many different kinds. Questions which require only a brief answer or a yes or no answer. So such questions have very short yes or no questions. Now, yes or no answers. Now, questions where there is only one correct answer. There are questions where the answer is open-ended. Questions which require a detailed, complex answer, and we have questions which do not require any definite answer and are more interpretive or inferential. So these are all the different kind of questions that we come across in our daily lives. Now let's see that why questioning and answering is very important. So these asking and answering questions are important as they facilitate understanding, they promote active engagement, they encourage critical thinking, builds relationships, facilitate learning, enhance problem solving, support decision making, they improve communication skills, and they foster curiosity and innovation. So this is why we are emphasizing on asking and answering questions, because they fulfill all these purposes which are very important to ultimately enhance our communication skills and our conversational skills. Now, we know that questions begin with mostly the words like what, when, where, and why, who. So we have these 5 W's for most of the questions, and also a question with how. So you can remember these 5 W's Now, most of us think of these words when we think of questions, and most of the questions, all of them basically, they begin with such words. Moving on, let's talk about meaning. In our SLO, we will be talking about explicit meaning, but my dear learners, in order to understand explicit meaning, you will be going through implicit meaning first, and then we will talk about explicit meaning later on. So now, implicit meaning. Have you ever heard this word implicit? Implicit is something that is implied. For example, not expressed directly but still understood because it is suggested by the choice of words, the tone of voice, and other factors. So, implicit meaning is actually the implied meaning. We can call it the hidden meaning as well. Now, these kind of meanings or this kind of language, they do not express you directly, but the choice of words, the tone of the voice, and the way of saying it says that whether it's an implicit language or the words that you are using is implicit or not. Now, let's look at an example. We have a sentence over here. After the argument, Jane didn't want to talk to Mark. Now, what happened in between? What was the argument about? We don't know because it's not told us directly. Hence, this kind of sentence where there is implied information, implied meaning is what we call an implicit meaning. So, let's talk about now about explicit meaning. Now, when something is explicit, it is basically out in the open. For example, explicit meaning must be written right there in the text. The author tells you exactly what he's trying to say and what's happening. Let's look at an example. I saw Bilal go to the restaurant and eat a sandwich. Now, this is very clear and nothing is hidden. Would be explicit as the author tells you exactly what Bilal is going to do in the restaurant. Now, such sentences, when you come across them, you can easily know that the meaning is actually explicit and you can clearly understand what the author is trying to tell you. Whereas in implicit sentences, when we are using or when the author is using implicit language, the meaning which you are trying to find is basically the implied meaning, the hidden meaning. You have to look at the context, you have to search more about it in order to understand the implied or implicit meaning in the sentence. Now, these two things are very much clear now. Let's look at more examples. Her feelings were hurt and she was very sad for days. Or, you see, that day in Harlem was one of the scariest days of my life. Now, my dear learners, by reading these examples, can you tell us that whether the meanings are implicit or explicit? Moving on. Here is a very interesting example for you. Let's look at this one. You have to find out whether it is implicit or explicit meaning. Here, this man is saying, I said, if you don't give me a pay rise, I'll leave. Now, this statement itself is very much clear and it is very much evident what the speaker is trying to say. So, this is explicit and clear. But if this man says, if you don't show more appreciation, I'll review my options. Now, we cannot fully understand about the appreciation part or reviewing my options part. So, we have to look for the context and we need more information. Now, that is quite implicit and the meaning is implied that the person is not happy and he will have to review other options. Now, this is the difference between implicit and explicit meaning. Now, here is a picture for you, and what you're supposed to do is that you have to look at this picture and ask questions to make your meaning explicit. Now, ask questions and try to answer it in an explicit way. Here is a simulation video for your better understanding. The teacher will play it for you. You can watch it later after this video lesson, and this will really help you in understanding about implicit and explicit meaning. Now, time for your classroom activity from page number 17 of your book. You have to work in pairs, one student in each pair as the speaker and the other as the listener. So you have to take your roll up and read these instructions and follow the classroom activity. Now it's time to introduce you with your homework. Now the homework is about practice the learned concept at home by asking questions and giving answers about anything with your family member. Now that you fully know about sentences that have implied meaning and sentences when they have explicit meaning, you can easily distinguish between these two different kind of meanings, and you also know about implicit and explicit language and how they work. So after this homework, I would like to introduce some resources for you. Your presentation, lesson plan, and a question bank. All these can be found in the description of the video. Thank you for listening, my dear learners. I hope that you had great time learning about different kind of meanings and especially explicit meaning. Until the next video lesson, this is your instructor Zia Hamid. Allah Hafiz.